Big achievements require vision and the moxie to see it through. Steve Ross has an ample supply of both. As chairman of related companies, Ross has built high-profile projects like Hudson Yards, a $25 billion development spread across Manhattan's West Side. His company also owns workout brands Equinox and SoulCycle, and he's been in headlines recently about those companies and his support for President Trump. Plus, Ross owns the Miami Dolphins, helping him amass a net worth of $7.7 billion. Some money he's given away, including nearly $400 million to the University of Michigan, his alma mater. He's here to talk about how to build the world in your image from the ground up. Hello everyone, I'm Andy Serwer. Welcome to Influencers and welcome to our guest Stephen Ross, chairman of the related companies and owner of the Miami Dolphins. Stephen, great to see you.
Great to be here, thank you.
So let me ask you first of all about Hudson Yards, which is probably the biggest thing on your plate. And for those people who don't know what Hudson Yards is, can you give us a Hudson Yards 101 and tell us where we are?
Well, what we did was really try to create a live, work, play environment, knowing that, today with people's issues with congestion and also sustainability being such an important part of really development in our future. So it came out of that. We had developed Time Warner Center, and we saw the impact that had in Columbus Circle in the city. And being a real estate developer, you really love to do things that are the more impactful, the better. I mean, at least I do, and the challenge of doing it. So Hudson Yards is the largest project ever done in the United States. We've opened it up about 3 months ago with about 11 million square feet. Out of the total, we'll have roughly 20 million square feet when we're done with it, if we don't buy any additional land, which we're trying. We've been involved we were selected in 2008, which was really not the great time, right in the middle of the Great Recession. And we started about 5 years ago, the physical construction. And, it's complex because it's built over rail tracks. But it's very iconic. We're shifting the center of gravity in New York from what I would say Rockefeller Center to Hudson Yards. In that period of time, which was really a wasteland because it was all rail tracks that we built over, today we get the highest rents in New York. Which tells you something. I mean, it tells you, one, New York is ready for change. It was a project that was needed because of all the obsolescence in all the office buildings here in New York. And we created a very, place where people want to be with a great icon, which is the vessel that we created in the middle of it, that today, they tell me that it's the most photographed piece on, I guess, Facebook or Snapchat or whatever, social media. So it's, we look back, and of course it was very easy, now that it's done, where the first phase is.
Right. Now, maybe this goes in sort of the category of no good deed goes unpunished. Some people like it. There have been some critics, some architecture critics or city planning critics, and then there are people who criticized tax breaks that you received. How do you respond to that?
I mean, you don't like to read the negative. They're so wrong. I mean, we got used to hearing and got sick of hearing everything as false news and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, with the New York Times, I think because they weren't involved or didn't have any influence in it, criticize us for getting all these tax breaks. First of all the city put money into the project, city and state. That's what really attracted us to the project. That was all done before we were ever selected. And, and to say that a tax break is building a subway extension, the first one in New York, that was really paid for by the surrounding land, and that it was done for us. It was done and approved probably 4 years, 5 years before we were even selected. So, I mean, when the New York Times starts talking and looking for these type of things of how we got benefits that other people might not have, you really wonder about the New York Times. And I really question them, and I don't know what their motivation is trying to do that. It's like they're on the bandwagon of AOC, and anything the city does and somebody prospers, they got an unfair advantage. And, and then the critics, I mean, they're the same critics who thought Rockefeller Center was terrible, And I mean, a critic, that's their job, is to criticize. They did a good job of criticizing, but I don't think anybody pays the attention. When we look at it and we see the amount of people that are there, we're drawing roughly 100,000 people a day in the weekends and 50,000 a day during the week. And the traffic and the excitement that's there, we're pleased. And it's only going to get better because the first phase isn't completely done yet. We have the observation deck to complete, which has an outdoor observation deck that you can look down. It's glass, and also a walk to the highest point in New York City, which would be very exciting. And then the room where they can really, have meals or what have you up at the observation deck. So there's still a lot to go, but I think so far we've been pleased with really the acceptance. The project.
Seems like people voting with their feet. By going there, I should say. Yeah. So let me switch over and ask you a little bit about the NFL as an NFL owner. What is it that makes the NFL so popular and lucrative?
Well, I mean, I think football, and it's a game that people really, it's America's game. And I think that, it involves, you're participating. It's different than any other sport. When you go to a hockey game or a basketball game, you don't know what the plays are. You don't know what the strategy is. They're going up and down the ice. Same with soccer or the fields. Football, everybody knows it's all, what do they do? And people are tuned into the rules. And so you're involved in the game. I think that's what's very unique that people don't talk about. And I think also they like, I wouldn't call it violence, but they like the contact. They like the physical contact. That's always, historically, that's always been the case. I mean, it started, with the Romans, with all the fighting and all the stuff that has existed throughout time, but it's not as a violent sport. I mean, before, it's like boxing. That was very popular for a while. People liked that. Then it became too violent, but I think football is something that people really, men and women, both enjoy it, and it's a great spectator sport.
Let me ask you a little bit about anthem protests. I think we're a bit removed from that. It has been an issue. At one point you said all the players in the Dolphins should stand, then you walked it back a little bit and said, well, it's up to them to decide. What's your take on that now?
Originally, I was very supportive because I think it was a message that had to get out.
Right.
And I supported the players, and I initially. When Trump made it about the military, that was a different story. He took that whole message and changed it. And with that, whenever you're really protesting against the military, I think nobody in this country really wants to, or would respect that at all. And that's when that has really changed. And I've told, players now, that isn't the message today. And you guys, I got your back. Do what you feel is right. And, I think it's something that's really forgotten, and people recognize and respect those people who are standing up for something and trying to send a message, and I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, and I'm very supportive of it.
Great. Let's switch over to your upbringing and the development of the company. So you grew up in Detroit initially, modest upbringing, and then moved to Miami in high school. Talk to us a little bit about those early days.
Well, I mean, moving from Detroit to Miami Beach was like a culture shock. I hadn't ever been to New York, and at that point, Miami Beach was all New Yorkers, and growing up in the Midwest, it was a little different. It was all about sports, and it was a different, lifestyle. And I went back to the University of Michigan because I wanted to be back there. That was, where my roots are, and I still have most of my family back there, and I'm now getting involved in Detroit and really bringing Detroit back. I think it's a city that's got a great upside, and it's really, I think it's the greatest opportunities in the United States, can be in Detroit. So.
It's interesting. I was reading, Stephen, that about your uncle Max Fisher, who was a mentor of yours and a businessman, an important businessman, prominent businessman, but he supported the business school at Ohio State, and you're at the University of Michigan. That's not a coincidence, is it? Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, I guess I grew up in a family where, it was about giving back and understanding, that you have a responsibility. And I always kind of looked up to my uncle. He was always busy. It wasn't like he was telling me what to do or, mentoring me, but it was more by example and knowing him. And when your grandparents are saying, why don't you be like your Uncle Max? I mean, he was a real well-known figure in Detroit, in fact, across the United States. So, and I became close to him in his, later years. In the early years, he had no time for anybody, and he was around the world, constantly. But so I respected him from afar, but knew all about him, and and it was a great role model, and that's really, I think, really inspired me. I mean, we were very modest in having, everybody talks about having a rich uncle. I had a rich uncle. Didn't do any good for me, but but I think just the idea that if he can do it, I can do it, and that's really what's probably motivated me and, got me going. So, and I told him when I was in the position to give the gift to the University of Michigan, I told him, hey, this is to Michigan, not Ohio State. We're going to one-up you.
What did he say about that? That's so funny, the rivalry.
Yeah, the rivalry, because there is such a big rivalry,
yes,
of course, between Michigan and Ohio State. And I mean, he was very proud. I mean, when I did give the gift, he came and spoke, and it was incredible. I think he was then around 94, and everybody had known about him. He was kind of, like a legend. And he spoke about, the idea that I'd given the gift there and the school was being named after me. I mean, in my mind, when they asked me to give a gift, I was prepared a big gift. I said, but if it's for the business school, it was my way of saying, hey, I've done okay.
That's fantastic. I read that you founded the Related Companies in 1972 with a $10,000 loan from your mother. Well, is that the case?
Yes. I mean, I had gotten fired in New York. I was working for Bear Stearns at the time for the wrong reasons, but whatever it is. And I wanted to stay in New York, and I knew I wasn't employable. So I said, Mom, I have some ideas. I want to stay here, but I need some money to live on. So she lent me $10,000 to live on, and I didn't know how long that would take me. And I thought about, where are the opportunities? What do I know best, and how can I apply my skills and grow something? And that's where I got involved in affordable housing. And wanting to be a real estate developer, when I was in Detroit, I was a tax lawyer there. I had a number of real estate clients. And then when I worked in New York here, first I worked for a firm called Laird in the real estate area, and they had problems, and I moved to Bear Stearns. So, I was looking for a job within a 2.5 year period of time. I wasn't going to get a third opportunity. That's why I, said, hey, I better go on my own. And obviously, it's the best thing I ever did.
Did you always have ambitions to have a global real estate business? And talk to us about the footprint of your company today.
Well, I mean, first of all, I started to sustain myself. I didn't know where it would go. I mean, I look at it today and I pinch myself. I mean, today, I grew it and really reinvested every penny I had into it, as opposed to going out and raising money from other people. And we've grown it to be the largest real estate developer in the United States. And I think we're known for the quality of what we do. I mean, I think it's the lessons I learned in Michigan, to be best in class, and that's what I think we've done in every area. And I look back at it now. It's the company's now 49 years old. It's people think, well, you've been that way. I mean, I remember trying to make payroll and how difficult it was at that point. But we've grown it because I've really been able to bring in good people. I mean, it's all, building any business, it's about people and the way you treat people and the people that you attract. And I think you want to be also looking to really be doing what other people aren't. You got to be thinking outside the box constantly, just not doing things, well, I'm going to do it better and that's why I'm going to succeed. You got to really be thinking outside the box. And, we've grown. I mean, initially I started in affordable housing, and today that's still a major portion of what we do. We're the largest buyers today of affordable housing in the country, and developers of that. And we have a portfolio of over 60,000 units across the country. So we haven't forgotten where we came from. And then we've just expanded and added on a lot of other different areas, that we're involved in.
Housing's so expensive in cities like New York and San Francisco. What sort of solutions do you think are out there for that?
Well, I mean, today land is so costly. So I think that, you're going to have to provide bigger densities so you lower the land cost, per unit. That's number one. Number two, I think that what New York is doing is so irresponsible now in terms of saying that things have to be built with union labor for affordable housing. That adds, especially in New York City today, the differential between union and non-union is probably 35 to 40% more costly as being built union. And today, the union workers represent about 70%, and the unions are 30%, and there's very few minorities in the unions. So where the opportunities, and what the politicians are doing, they're really defeating the purpose and really kind of being irresponsible in how they look at it and really provide for what is really needed today.
The Green New Deal just passed in New York City. You've been supportive of climate change advocacy. What do you think about these new rules?
I mean, I think it's something that's essential. I mean, you look back, and I think in these times, that's probably the most critical issue that we all face. That if we don't do something about the climate, we're marked for extinction. And, what can be more critical than that? I mean, there's other needs we have and everything, but in affordable housing. But unless we do something about the climate, we're not going to be here. I mean, it's not tomorrow, but it's probably the next 100 years. But you got to really prepare yourself, and we have to get off of greenhouse, gas, off of carbon and fossil fuels, and it's a question of time, and we're going through a transition now. I think people are recognizing that, not necessarily this administration, but I think the world really recognizes that is probably the key issue that we all face, and we need to start doing something about it.
Let me switch back to the NFL, Stephen, and ask you a little bit more about the Miami Dolphins. And I take it you're happy with your decision that you bought the team.
Love it. I mean, I love the challenge. I'm not happy with the way we've performed in my one-loss record, but in terms of the the operations of the club itself and what we've done for the community and benefited the community down there, which I think is a real responsibility. When you own a team, it's like owning a utility, and you really have a responsibility to that community. And I think what we've done for South Florida and how we've run the business there, I think we're number one in the NFL. We now have to translate that onto the field, because that's also part of what you owe to them, is to win.
Are you going to have to move the team?
I never move the team.
Okay. What about some of the challenges the NFL has, like head injuries, streaming, the future of the league?
Well, I mean, I think the future of the NFL is really, really bright. I mean, you can see today just the fact that how all the networks and what they're paying for the media, and we're probably the biggest media property in the world today. The brand is unbelievable, and you want to do everything to protect the brand. Yes, I mean, the issues with the head injuries, the NFL is doing everything they can, I think the concussion rate was down 30% last year. I mean, they're changing the rules, they're looking at the equipment and making sure that that is not an issue. I mean, everybody is concerned about it, and I think today it is getting safer and will get safer, and the research that's being done, in terms of the impact and things that they can do medically to make sure that, those head injuries don't have a lasting, problem with, for the players.
Right. And you feel confident about cord cutting and streaming and what the NFL is doing. I know that you were saying the TV networks have bid a lot of money, but the ratings on TV have been flattish.
Well, I mean, that's because, they're looking at it other ways, like you say. So I don't think the ratings that you're looking at are, comparing apples to apples. But if you look at the popularity of it and what the people are willing to pay for it, I mean, people want to see it. So they're one way or another, the NFL is going to get paid for people viewing it, and that really hasn't gone down. I mean, there's nothing. If you take probably the top 20 shows per year that I've seen, 19 of them are NFL. So I mean, that says everything right there.
Let me ask you a little bit about your company and your view on the economy right now. You probably have a pretty interesting perspective on the business of the United States. What are you seeing out there?
Well, I mean, today I think we're going through a transition. The economy, you look at it today, in terms of employment, we're probably close to full employment. At the same time, people don't have the faith and aren't spending money. The housing markets are down, considerably. And I know in New York, the condo market is, way overbuilt, or the sales aren't there, even though people want to live in the cities. And, a lot of things that have been done, like with the elimination of state and city taxes and interest limitation on interest deductibility, it really takes a lot of value out of the homes, and people, therefore, that's typically across America, that's the single biggest asset. So people today are renting a lot more, and then you have the affordability issues, which are there. So, real estate, the difference in real estate has changed so much, basically because there's so much money available. People are always today they're looking for alternative investments. They're looking for yield. And, while the stock market is so high, it scares a lot of people. And, it takes a real expert to understand the stock market. It's not that, the average person should be investing and understanding in the stock market. Typically, they're going to lose, So, and, people are looking for yield, and where do you find that yield? You can make the argument now for real estate. It has its time. So there's such a availability of cash for real estate, and real estate developers, if they have the cash, they're going to build, forgetting about, supply and demand. And the banks have, been a lot more restricted. I mean, a lot of in the past, the recessions were led by real estate, the overbuilding. We're not seeing that now, but because the banks aren't making the loans, they really, have been able to kind of restrict themselves. It's the offshore or off banking type transactions that are really fueling all the dollars that are going into real estate. So, it's a tough business today, but everything is,
I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you feel President Trump is handling the economy, particularly when it comes to, say, tariffs and tax policy and tax changes to the tax code.
Well, I mean, no matter what, there's some unintended consequences, from the tax code. Certainly, it's boosted the economy. No one could say the economy has never been any stronger than it is today, from that perspective. In terms of, Trump and, there's a good and bad, obviously, with anything, The trade policies, I think we need him as a strong leader, what he's done with China and taken on China. Somebody had to do it, and he was probably the only person that would take them on the way they are, and I think that's important for the future of the United States, from that perspective. And so, I mean, some of the things and some of how you look at America, I mean, there's a lot of problems with that, But I think overall, if you look and you see what's the options are on the far left, I think in the long term, that is not good for America, And I think that today people are happy, A lot of people have problems with Trump. We have a divided country like we've never had before. Politics has really changed, a lot. I'm optimistic, because this America, we're going to find, the right direction, and we'll continue that.
Right, maybe some more centrist candidates.
Well, yes, I think we need. Trump is not a crazy conservative. I mean, Trump is a centrist from that standpoint. He has a different style than most people are used to, But he is strong and he is doing things. And
did you know him when he was a real estate guy here in New York?
Yeah, I've known Donald for a long time.
Right. What was your first impression when you got to know him?
He's different, but he's been successful, and I like him.
Well, and so you talked about some of these left candidates. You mentioned AOC. Was that a mistake when AOC and her supporters, I guess, essentially made it the case that Amazon wasn't going to put its second headquarters here?
Tremendously. I mean, who was she really representing? I mean, herself, I think, and her own agenda, and and her popularity, and she's become in a very short time a very powerful person. I think she's taking us totally in the wrong direction. I think if you ask the people in Queens or New York City, her being against Amazon was probably something that was very detrimental to them in the city, But she wants to be out there, she wants to be up front, and she wants to take us in a direction that I don't think America, is ready for or ever will be.
Right. And just another question or two about politics. So are there any Democrats that you think are good candidates?
Well, I mean, I think the more moderate Democrat, the better it is, if they were to be elected. I'm a Republican, but.
Okay. So what's going on with the housing market right now? Do you think that we're getting close to another bubble?
I mean, I think it's, like I said before, I think it's overbuilt, they're for sale. I think we need certainly a lot of affordable housing and figuring out ways how we can provide for that. That's going to take government subsidies. It's going to take, changes for that to occur. But in terms of a bubble, I don't think we're at that point that it would be. Right now, I think if anything, you look at it, the stock market and a lot of these new offerings and the pricing of things, I think those things I question before I question about which is going to take us down. What is going to be the reason? I mean, things don't go straight up. So at some point we're at a recession. I mean, I think real estate today is probably in the eighth inning. We're not, it's certainly not starting something fresh. We're at a point now where I think there will be a slowdown because it has to happen.
Right. How do you decide where to place your chips, Stephen, when it comes to philanthropy? We talked about the University of Michigan. There's so many options, obviously, and people holding their hand out.
Yeah, that's right. You can always find places.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. People are out there. But I mean, what I'm interested in the climate, which I'm very involved with, the World Resource Institute, which is a global, probably the largest global nonprofit involved in dealing with the climate in the country. Very, very effective. Education, from that standpoint. I also set up a nonprofit dealing with race in this country called RISE that came out of the incident we had in Miami, our bullying incident about 4 or 5 years ago. That's growing, and we're probably in 25 states already, and I think it's having an impact. And I think today at that point when I looked at it, I thought, racism is probably one of the biggest issues that no one really wants to deal with in America and really holding us back. And I think we're making some real progress, along there. And there's plenty of it. Then you want to support your local, institutions, the hospitals, the museums, cultural institutions. But I like to think in the future. I'm leaving most of my money. I signed the Giving Pledge, and really giving back, and trying to really decide and working with my family as to what it should stand for and what we should be involved in, going forward. I really, I believe in the philosophy is, you give till you feel good, and I think it's an obligation, to really give back, you know, I mean, I feel very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. I never would have believed it, but, you know, it's a good feeling.
Hey, before I let you go, I want to ask you about your fitness companies,
Right.
Equinox and SoulCycle. I haven't talked to you about that.
Well, we saw a number of years ago, probably just about 12 years ago, we had leased to Equinox space. And I saw how that was being used, and I saw that there was a really connection with our real estate, how it could really benefit it. And they were looking to go public, and I got to know Harvey Spivak, who was the CEO. It was owned by 2 private equity firms, and they asked me to go on the board, you know. And so I wanted to know more about it, and I was on the board for about 9 months, and the opportunity came to buy the company. And so, you know, I stepped up. I saw you know, you could see the importance of what health has become. I mean, like I like to say is, you know, health is the new wealth. And today, you know, we've grown it. It's become a great brand. We've branched out. We own SoulCycle as well as, you know, the Equinox Fitness Clubs. We have a lower priced option that is hot as can be, called Blink. And we're now opening up Equinox hotels. You know, and it's, you know, it's all a logical, you know, growth in terms of today we have over 350, 400,000 members. And I know when I ask my secretary, when I'm traveling, I want to stay in a place that has a good health club. Very few hotels, they have a room. You know, I like to work out every day. And I think that's what America is looking to do. So that's got us to go into the hotel business. And we hired the president of Four Seasons, and we're, you know, managing it ourselves. Some of the large chains wanted to manage it for us, but we thought to do it the right way and that we could control it, you know, we brought on our whole management staff. And we opened our first one on July 15th. We have 13 sites already tied up under development. And I would say in 10 years, we'll probably have 80 hotels around the world. So it's really, you know, continuing to grow the company, and we're getting into the digital business so that both you can, you know, when you're not able to go to a club, you'll be able to do it at home, and you'll be able to select, you know, all these different opportunities in terms of what you want in terms of bike, you know, the bike or running. We've set up another company called Precision Run. It deals with runners. So we'll have our own treadmills. So it's really the company is really growing, and it's you know, for today's times, it's really a hot brand that, you know, we're looking to continue to make it better and be dominant in our area.
Last question, Stephen. This show is called Influencers, and I want to ask you how you see using your influence on the world.
Well, I mean, I mean, I do what I feel, you know, is right and what is good. And if that has an impact on other people, you know, it's like our development. I think that our development's people want to follow you because if, you know, you're doing it right and you're successful, you're going to have an impact, you know. And I think, you know, by doing things is the greatest way to influence people, by doing it right and having them kind of, you love flattery, you know, that somebody trying to do what you're doing, you know, and that's probably the most influence you could possibly have, except what you do with your own children, you know.
Stephen Ross, chairman of the Related Companies, owner of the Miami Dolphins, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
I'm Andy Serwer. You've been watching Influencers. We'll see you next time.